How do we know what we know about turfgrass science? Welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology. My name is TravisShaddox. You've joined me on a Tuesday evening show. Before I forget, there may be a little bit of a disconnect slightly with some memberships here recently, so just keep that in mind. Members already know that I've left some information in the members only tab, whatever. And then on Monday morning, when we normally have a members only show, I might open that up to the public this next week on Monday morning at 10 a.m. So keep that in mind if you want an extra episode. The members only show will probably be public on this coming week. I have some logistical issues. So without further ado, so I'm a nutrient guy. I'm a soil guy. That's what I do for a living. That's what I do for fun. But I don't really do anything else. I don't do weeds. You've heard me say this before 100 times. I don't do insects. I don't do anything. I don't do water. And we're going over water. And one of the biggest priorities, I would say, risk factors in turfgrass development is water. And my members have for many, many months told me, hey, you've been going over water. You've been talking about water, but you haven't gone over it yet. And I said, well, I don't do that. I don't do water that well. I'm not knowledgeable on water. But if, it's okay to say you don't know. When someone asks you, water this, water that, you don't know. But I know who knows. And that's who I got today. Dr. Matteo Serena with the USGA. How are you, Matteo?
Good. How are you, Travis?
I'm very good. I know very, very little about water. I know enough to be dangerous. And and that goes with almost everything in turfgrass management other than soil fertility. But I think what's critical is to know who knows the answer. Have colleagues and friends that can help you find those directions, because you can't know everything about everything. And so that's why I wanted to have you on today to talk about, one, your article is very good, but it's a little bit above my head. And then two, it's about water. So I'm like, let me just get Matteo on here and help me understand this. So Matteo, why don't you tell everybody about who you are, what you do, and just kind of the elevator speech about how you got to where you're at.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. My background is in water conservation. So as you can tell from my accent, I'm not from around here. I'm from Italy, and I did my undergraduate and my master work at the University of Padova, where I looked at warm season grasses in that environment, which at the time, basically almost no one were using warm season grasses, in particular in northern Italy. And so we're trying to introduce Bermuda grass and zoysia grass as a way to replace cool season grasses and help primarily lawn and other turfgrass situation to conserve water. After that, I was invited for a couple of years as a research scientist, one of those exchange programs, the J visa, to join the Turfgrass group at New Mexico State University. And I did a lot of work with Bernd Leinauer, which he's also known for his work with water conservation and turfgrass management under saline condition. After 2 years of that, there was a possibility to do a PhD. And so I did my PhD, and there it's where I did most of my work with subsurface drip irrigation, did a lot of work with grasses screening for drought, salinity, irrigation controllers, chemical product for alleviating drought conditions. And so with that, there was a lot of good work that went on to that with the group at New Mexico State.
Are you talking about wetting agents, chemicals to alleviate drought? What are you talking about, wetting agents?
Yeah. So some of the first, that was actually Marco Schiavone that did his PhD work in utilizing wetting agents, and plant co-regulators on Bermuda grass and Seashore paspalum for drought. And then a combination of those. And then after we started that work, we started to get involved with different chemical companies in producer to test their product at our facility. We always used to say we didn't need a rainout shelter. The sky was our rainout shelter. So it's a very suitable environment to do drought research. And so I was in New Mexico for a while, over 13 years. After that, I moved to California. I was invited to work with Dr. Jim Baird at UCR. And after a little bit over a year at UCR, I saw the position with the United States Golf Association. I wasn't really sure, if they wanted to have me, because I don't have a golf background. I never worked at a golf course. I did research. I kill a lot of grass at the golf courses.
Okay.
But that's as far as it goes. And they saw the potential in my background with the research and with the water conservation work. And so pretty soon I'll be celebrating 3 years with the United States Golf Association. And so my title there is a Senior Manager for Irrigation Research and Services.
Okay.
The last few years with the USGA, I've been trying to bridge the gap between university research, small plot, some of these, experimental technology or some strategies to reduce water use, and try to bring these onto like a golf course situation with like pilot project demonstration, which sometimes is not very, I try to bring it with like a scientific mind, to put like sensor and data into place and replicate it. But a lot of times it's difficult to do that when you only have a small fairway available or a side of a rough or a couple of tees or so. But it's been very joyful. And also last year we worked to publish the water conservation playbook, which is available online for everyone that wants to go and download 212 pages of content specifically for water conservation in golf. That's kind of like my story. I know it was a long elevator. Probably we were somewhere in Dubai doing like 200 floors.
Oh, so that document is on water conservation through the USGA?
Yes. So if you go on to the USGA or simply on Google and type USGA water conservation playbook, it will come up. It's available in a PDF as an entire 212 pages or as a separate chapter. So there's 9 chapters available.
Okay.
In each chapter, describe a strategy that a golf course can implement to reduce water use.
Okay. Hang on.
Thank you for putting the link there.
I'm trying to. I think I'm messing things up though. Anytime I do something funky, I try to do something new, I'm going to end up breaking the system. Let me see if I can do. Oh, there we go. Now the link's up there. Well, it doesn't show all the way up, but you can at least see that it's in the chat for those people that want to follow that link. We actually have more things in common than I realized. One, my wife and children are Brazilian. They have Brazilian citizenship, but they're also Italian. They have Italian citizenship as well. And Jim Baird is one reason why I'm in turfgrass. He doesn't even know that. Jim Baird doesn't remember me. He doesn't remember. He was at Oklahoma State in 97. I think it was 96 or 97. I can't remember. And he got some momentum behind him to the point where the word started to get out among the Okies out in the farmland. And I caught wind that there was this turfgrass professor at Oklahoma State when I was a senior in was I a senior? No, I was out of high school for a couple of years. Anyway, I'd heard something about this professor up there that was doing some good things, and so I decided to look into that. And then so I went to Oklahoma State, and the first semester I went to Oklahoma State was when he left. So I was like, and Dr. Bell came in like the next year, and anyway, we have more things in common. We both were influenced by Dr. Baird, and we have some Italian stuff in our family. So
I know I have have a lot of respect for both, Bernd Leinauer and Jim Baird. I think they're two some of the greatest scientists that we have here in the States. More
Mm,
like some
mm.
big names.
Yeah. Jim Bayard wrote one of the greatest USGA documents ever. I quote it probably, 3 times a year. And it's the document where I think it's called Fertilizers 101 or Fertility 101. I can't remember what the title is, but he goes through like numerous things, and he's very, very terse with his language.
Yes.
straight to the point.
Yeah,
And
he's probably one of the best writer and editor that I had the pleasure to work with. And
yeah.
that is not my skill.
Hmm.
Maybe like part of it could be being a non-native speakers, but
Yeah. Well, no matter, my wife speaks absolute perfect English, but she's never going to speak it and write it as good as I do. Just like if I went to Brazil, I would never speak Portuguese as good as she does. If I lived there for 40 years, I'd never speak it. So you're doing great. You're doing great. So, but the reason I wanted to get you on here was because, again, we're going over water, and I don't know if you've had an opportunity to really listen to a whole lot of the stuff that I do, but in my opinion, I don't know if you've ever read the ABCs of Turfgrass written by O.J. Noir from like 1921 or 25. I can't remember. It's a really old book. But in there, the first 5 or 10 pages, he has listing the influencing factors of turfgrass development. And what I would refer to them now are risk factors. And he talks about water, light, temperature, injury, and fertile soil. And a lot of people, I don't know, that maybe listen to my channel might think that I developed that. I didn't develop it. It's been at least since O.J. Noir in the 1920s. But what I did was I felt it was useful or more productive to prioritize those in some sort of reasonable way to help somebody understand, well, if I'm going to have all 5 of these things working and against me in some cases, well, which one should I tackle first? And to me, it's always water it's almost always the most influencing factor in turfgrass development. And what I've mentioned to a lot of people, and at least in my experience and some in the literature as well, it's almost always too much water. Seems like people are applying too much.
Well, that's
I don't.
part of the reason why the USGA construction recommendation for putting greens they're
There you go.
based on sand and drainage.
There you go.
So to get rid of the water faster.
Exactly. So I was mentioning this the other day. I went over the water movement and soil video from 1959, and I was trying to explain that it's not possible for a properly functioning USGA putting green to get saturated. It's impossible. As long as it's functioning correctly, it's never going to get saturated. It's when something malfunctions, the drainage, or we have iron cementing layers, or we have black layer from salt, whatever the case is, there's things that can happen. But that's the genius of that whole system. And but where I'm going with this, Matteo, is I don't do water that good. I know just enough to be dangerous, And so your paper, which came out in 2022, it's talking about optimizing the frequency and amount for establishment. And we're going to go, for those listeners, they know I'm going to be going over water for many, many months now. But I wanted to start with this one because a lot of questions I get, one of the most frequent questions I get is the frequency of application, not necessarily on establishing the turf grass, but on established turf. How frequently should I water? And what they're getting at is deep and infrequent or light and frequent. This sort of concept that's been around for decades.
Yeah.
Which one should they do? Is there any? Basically, what I want to know is there any evidence to support it? And we're going to get down that road at in some other paper. But for today, growing in cool season turf grass, how frequently should we apply water? How much should we apply the water? Is there any differences between turf grasses? That's what this paper is talking about. And so that was my sort of introduction into this paper. And I read through it and I'm like, no, I got to get Matteo on here. It's a little bit above my head. It may be simple to you, but it's not so simple to me. So
okay.
I appreciate you writing this paper, and I'm all ears. I mean, you want to, the name of it, just for those listening, it's Optimizing Frequency and Amount of Irrigation Needed to Establish Cool-Season Grasses. It's published in 2022 in Agronomy Journal, one of our top tier journals. Would you like to go through the paper, or you want me to kind of guide it? What do you feel like doing?
Sure. If you wanted me to start giving an overview and a little bit of a background story behind that. So if you go into the literature and trying to find either irrigation amount or frequency required during establishment, there is really almost nothing. There's some anecdotal information. There's some, here's what we think, what we believe is the best, but not substantial data. Part of that is because, as you know, when you're trying to publish a paper, you need repeated studies. So oftentimes you need 2 or multiple years of the same trial because you have environmental factor. You could do something similar, which I believe in doing that paper, I cite Dan Sandor, which did his work at Arkansas, and part of the study was in a greenhouse. So it's a lot easier to do replication and repetition in a greenhouse. But when you're talking about a field study, you need to have 2 years of establishment. That means you have to seed it 2 times, establish it, measure it, kill it, and then reseed it, basically. If you're establishing from sod or from sprigs and you want to publish, you need the same. You can get around that if, for example, you have 2 locations, but sometimes researcher tends to be, or reviewer tends to be a little finicky, even when it comes to like different location. For example, it reminds me of a sprigging paper that I was reading from Dr. Richardson, where they did 1 year, it was in Arkansas, and another year was in China. I believe he went and did a sabbatical there and got the opportunity to repeat the work. And once you repeat it, then you compare the data and you publish it. So that's why it's difficult. So going back to the original, that's why it's difficult to find paper on establishment, because typically you will need 2 years of establishment. And so the way that we came across that was we had a study, and this one was the time was sponsored by Byronbrook. When I was at New Mexico State University, they were a pretty big contributor among other industry supporters of the Turfgrass program. And so the study was to screen for drought tolerance of cool season grasses. And I was the time I was talking with my advisor. The first year that we did this one was 2012, so it was before I finished my PhD. And I did a little bit of work before on establishing Cici and Bermuda grass from seed. And I thought, well, why, there's still a lack of data on establishing cool season grass in terms of like how much water is required. And at that time, we were going to a drought. And so different cities in the Southwest, like El Paso, Albuquerque, they were starting to introduce restrictions in days to water. I know that you're going to go through this in a few weeks, but basically there was an ordinance where they were telling people if your street number or if your house number is an odd number, you water on your odd days, and if it's even, you water on your even days. There was also the 1, 2, 3, which tells, in the winter time you water once a week in the shoulder months, so spring and fall you water twice, and in your summertime you water 3 times. And we understand that this one, you can sustain turfgrass in those conditions once they're established and once they got the root system developed. But we didn't know, what's going to happen if you have those restrictions in place and you have to reestablish your lawn or you have to reestablish your golf course. So can you establish turfgrass irrigating every other day? So basically having 24 hours or more without a drop of water to be added. So that was kind of the idea of that. And since we had, keep in mind that we wanted to have those plots established at the end of, basically by summertime. So we didn't want it to put like a once a week irrigation or every 3 days, because that would have been probably too critical for those seedlings.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to do it every day and every other day. So one day yes, one day no.
Mm-hmm.
And because we had space available, we decided on to two irrigation treatments. And the way we picked was that we felt this 50% was going to be a little bit too extreme, too low. Keep in mind, again, we wanted to have those plots to be established by the end of the summer or the end of spring. So we decided to go with a 60% of ET and 120% of ET. And they were replicated 4 times. And so the other trial, the other repetition of the trial came in 2017, where basically from 2013 to 2016, which is 3 years, we ran the study, which I believe was recently published by Elena Sevostianova in the Crop Science Journal.
Okay.
So that one is the portion where we irrigate turfgrass with different crop coefficient to test their drought tolerance.
Okay.
And then Barenburg came back to us in 2016, we ended the study. We sprayed out those grasses. We cleaned up the area. And in 2017, we reestablished. So that gave us the opportunity to repeat the study that was done in 2018 and 2012, sorry. And so that was that's when we decided then to publish those data.
Okay, so let me just get my bearings here. So thanks for explaining why that happened, because that's what I'm interested in, is figuring out like the logistics. You know, a lot of people think we do research in the perfect utopian environment. It just doesn't exist. I mean, there's other things going on. And so you ran the study, and then you killed it, and then you did it again many, many years later, and that part was published, and now we have a chance to repeat it. Now, my question is, so I can get my bearings, you're doing 60% ET and 120% ET, and you're doing it every day. You're applying water every day or every other day. So my question is, on those days where you irrigated, it's just one irrigation event?
I believe that the 60% of ET, if I recall correctly, I have to check if it was noted in the paper. I don't think so.
I didn't remember reading it in the paper, but I could have missed it.
Yeah, but it was applied.
It says
just trying to read it really quick.
Which were obtained and installed each.
So they were 12 hours apart.
Twice per day. It says blocks were irrigated twice per day with irrigation events 12 hours apart. Okay, 12 hours apart.
Correct.
Okay, so on the day that there was an irrigation applied, it was applied, let's call it whatever, 8 in the morning and 8 at night, or whatever the cycle was. And this is what I think, well, I don't want to presume anything, but I don't know if the average person is going to understand applying amounts of water as ET. Can you just briefly explain how you would come up with the volume of water or the time that you'd have to run the clock for to achieve a known percentage of the ET?
Absolutely. It's probably one of the most questions I get because of the unfamiliarity with the ET. So evapotranspiration, it's a number which is either in inches or millimeters. For our European friends, I know that I'll have someone listening from Italy and Europe. So, let's say your ET for the week is 1 inch or 2.54 millimeters, so 25.4 millimeters. Then what you need is your precipitation rate from your sprinkler system, which is like half an inch per hour or 0.6 per hour, or in millimeters. So the way that we were doing it on that research was at the beginning of the trial, we were putting out catch can on each plot, and we were determining the actual precipitation rate. We were also making sure that the distribution uniformity was above 75%. And if it wasn't, we were starting to make adjustment, like changing the nozzles or straight and leveling the sprinkler head, which is very important. So we were trying to achieve that 75. So sometimes, I had weeks where I was running irrigation audit on those plots for days. Once you have that number for the precipitation rate, it's basically a simple division. You take your weekly ET and you divide it by your precipitation rate, and you'll get your runtime. So something very simple. Then we were taking that amount and either apply it on a daily basis. So that amount that you get, let's say, keep in mind it's the same 1 inch. You will multiply, if you apply 60%, you multiply that by 0.6, and you will get 0.6 of an inch. And then you divide that by your precipitation rate, and you give that amount either on a daily frequency, twice a day, or every other day, also twice a day. Or if you have your 120%, you will multiply by 1.2. So you come up with a 1.2 inches divided by your precipitation rate, and then you do the same. So
okay, yeah, it's all pretty much straightforward. I actually want to presume that the average person would know that. I mean, it's nerds like us do it day in and day out, but they're thinking, well, I'm thinking gallons or I'm thinking inches, and well, we're talking ET. And and I've mentioned it's rare, and this is one example where the volume in most publications will say water was applied with some amount of ET to minimize wilt or at first sign of wilt or whatever. But in this publication, it is about water, so that's a completely different situation. But it's always relative to the ET, or a reference ET is how we apply water, because we don't want the water to be biasing our data, right? It's super important. So we're used to doing this in our world. I don't know how frequent it is done in the other world. And I'm glad you essentially explained, you explained what an irrigation audit is. And we published some of those data. I forget when it was, 2021 or 20, I can't remember, when it was the GCSA survey. And I was a little bit surprised at how infrequent irrigation audits were conducted on the average golf course. I didn't realize it's fairly infrequent, and it's a little disappointed to see that, because water is so important for turfgrass growth. And if it's just like, wow, that's like the one thing that is so influential, but yet they're not doing irrigation audits as frequently as I thought they would. Well, maybe their system's new, I don't know, but it was a little bit surprising to me. So you explain what an irrigation audit is, and I appreciate you doing that, because it's critical. I mean, how you gonna know if you don't go out there and do it?
Yeah, because you said it correctly. We were doing a lot of research with investigating drought and water, so all of our system had to be constantly either adjusted or evaluated with an irrigation audit. So I believe, like the first week where I stepped my foot in the States, at the time my supervisor, the first things they taught me was how to do an irrigation audit. So my first day on the job was putting out catch can and measuring volume of water. Yeah. You even talked about uniformity, all that stuff. Here's a question. It might not get all on the screen. If it doesn't, I'll fix it. I did get on the screen. Here's a question for you, Matteo. Can you read it? If you wanted to water based on ET, where would you find current ET rates? Okay. So we had a weather station on site, literally, 20 feet from those turfgrass plots. Mm-hmm. And most of the research stations they're doing research have weather stations. So you can even get a very inexpensive one, and this is usually what golf courses would do. And that's where you could find reliable ET data. There's also website out there that offers it's called an historic ET, so it kind of gives you an idea. If you put your zip code, for example, it gives you an idea what's your monthly or daily ET for that month. It's not very accurate, but it's in the ballpark. Okay. There is also a network of weather station that a lot of states offer. So, in that time when I was in New Mexico, there was the New Mexico State site. Arizona has the ASMET, for example. California has a CMIS station. I believe almost every state has a form of.
Yeah, I believe this request, Joe Cal, I think if I remember correctly, he's in California. And okay. So what would be the name again of the system in California? Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
It's a CMIS, SCIMIS, CMIS station.
Okay. In Florida, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, in Florida, it's called FAWN, the Florida Area Weather Network. So what you're saying, I didn't know. I mean, I knew they had them, but I didn't know the names of these in New Mexico and California.
Typically, like with a search, the one that I had, surprisingly, the one I had trouble finding was in Las Vegas, and I've actually been using OpenET for some historic data from like states in the West.
Okay.
But that one offers like historic. It doesn't offer like, if you want yesterday's ET or, last week, you probably want to go into those state network.
I was wrong. Joe's in Connecticut. I'm sorry. So one of my members is in California. I'm sorry, Joe. You're in Connecticut. So, but one way or the other, the point is they're out there. You know what I found useful in this regard, not with like hardcore numbers, but kind of guide you in this, is just go to like ChatGPT and ask it what is like the network, the weather network system in my area in Connecticut, and generally it'll kind of give you these network systems are available. I wouldn't trust those for like hard numbers, but it'll kind of give you a direction on where to go find your network.
Yeah, and one of the things, and I wanted to, I actually just writing the USGA Water Conservation Playbook, there is a portion on precision irrigation strategies that talks about the different type of ET, how to get it, how to use it. So because we talk, so in this case, we were talking about reference ET, which is ETO, which is for a reference crop. In that case is a tall fescue crop mowed at 12 centimeters. And it's an estimate, right? So we're taking weather data and apply the modified Penn-Montier equation, which calculates temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, and solar radiation, and give you an estimate of what the potentiality is supposed to be, and then you apply the crop coefficient, and you get the reference ET, which is for your reference crop, which is typically it's either alfalfa or turf. And then from there, you can compare it with actual ET, which now some of the weather network are getting better because they're utilizing eddy covariance tower, and they're using a different model to estimate actual ET, because traditionally it used to be done with weighing lysimeters.
Okay, good, great, perfect. Well, that answers that question.
You wanna know, like what the amount of water that leaves the system, right? If you're thinking like an engineer where they put everything into a box, you want to measure how much water, basically after it's done percolating from gravity, how much water leaves the system from above. There
you go. Perfect. That's a good explanation, better than I could have given. So I appreciate that. So you have this study going out. You're applying water twice a day, or you're applying it twice a day every other day, and you get to where you're taking data. It looks like you take turf establishment using digital image and turf coverage using some digital image, and it's fairly straightforward. I mean, it seems like for the most part, it's fairly straightforward. You have a couple different applications of rates of water, a couple different intervals of water. You want to talk about the turf grass varieties? I don't know. Let's see, where is that at? It's down here. Oh yeah, you had, looks like you had Kentucky bluegrass, tall fescue, and perennial ryegrass, and I don't know if you did each one of these varieties individually or you did them like as blends, or how did you do that?
So the blend is the one from the Pennington.
Okay, right here.
Pennington. Yeah. So the in brackets there is the percentage of each, but it was also as individual species. We did not have a mix of bluegrass and rye or bluegrass and fescue, which that's what you will almost more commonly find at a box store.
Okay. So you have a number of varieties. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, probably 8 or 9, 10 different varieties of Kentucky bluegrass. Probably the same with tall fescue and 8 or 9 perennial ryegrass. It's a big study.
Yeah.
You decided to go all in on this. I mean, people don't recognize the size of a study like this. It's enormous. You got all the, you probably have what, 30 something 40 cultivars. Then you got to do 4 different treatments. You got 4 different reps, and it expands greatly real quick.
It was actually, so this was a little bit of the behind the story, but it was actually 5. We had a 5th treatment that we decided to not include, which was 180% of ET that was applied every day, which that's what we felt that golf courses or homeowners would do when they have to irrigate. I had a good conversation with Dr. Bigelow last week where he said, when they put down the grass, it's like green side up and make it float. That's how much water they gave. And I was like, I'm going to steal that quote, but I give you credit for it.
Well, that's a lot. Might be more than 180, might be 180,000, who knows? But so so you have a huge study. You have 2 different rates, 2 different application regimes, or 2 different intervals, and you're taking establishment day. This is only during establishment. So for the person who is maybe at home, Matteo, and wants to kind of know the 10,000 foot results, you have a couple different species, 3 different species, a bunch of different cultivars. What's the take-home message from the results? If like, just start with that, and then we'll go through the details. How about that?
So my biggest take-home at that time was with ryegrass, it's so fast at germinating that it didn't really matter, and it was so quick. It just come out so fast. It grows so fast, and that's what ryegrass is known for. That's why it's used in the overseeding market.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't understand, what I do understand, but I don't understand is why there is so much water put out. Because clearly from this study, you can see that 60% of VT was sufficient, and even irrigated every other day was sufficient.
More than enough.
To establish ryegrass. The other 2 are a little bit slower on the establishment.
I think you're talking about this right here. Basically, what you're saying is this little guy here. We're talking about turfgrass emergence in 2012. At least that's emergence, I guess. So germination. Yeah, it didn't matter whether you did it 60 or 120. It was all the same with perennial ryegrass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So perennial ryegrass, as you see, there is a letter D on every column and row, and that indicates that there's not statistical difference.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, you hinted on it a little bit in the result and the discussion, but I think you're right. It just germinates so fast. Yeah. You just kind of got to breathe on it a little bit, give it a little moisture, and it's as soon as it starts getting active, it just takes off. And so the amount, the what do you call it? just the time between it is so short. You hardly have. I mean, there might be a difference, but you'd have to be so precise to see the difference. It's not. Pragmatically, it's not important. It's going to germinate anyway. So.
And that's part of the reason, why a lot of time on seed mixes or where you purchase from the store for homeowners to like those turf, they're called like repair.
Yeah.
A lot of time they have a percentage of ryegrass because of that wow effect and satisfaction really like immediate.
Yep.
You put down the seed, you give a little bit of water, and then it'll just come up. And I've seen ryegrass germinating and starting to grow on concrete, on top of the sprinkler head, where there's just a little bit of plastic, the seed drop in, and it just
the back of your truck on the bumper. I mean, whatever. I've seen it. It'll grow. It'll germinate anywhere. That's true. I think you hit it on the head. It's that I don't know if it's just a perception or the homeowner perception or the market. I don't know what it is, but they assume that they think they're selling more seed. Maybe they are, because the homeowner sees that instantly. Oh, it's like sometimes it's 4 or 5 days and you can start to see some germination. It's lightning fast. Whereas tall fescue, it might be 2 weeks. I mean, I've helped my neighbors seed their lawns. It'll be 10, 11, 12 days, depending on time of year, if we did in the spring or the fall. I'm like, just hold on. Just take it easy. It's coming. You're better off, but just take it easy.
Yeah, and at least it was in New Mexico. Kentucky bluegrass was actually like one of the slowest, either in germinating or establishing, and you kind of see it from the days, where both they take 220 days to reach 90% of coverage, which is what we consider like fully established.
Yeah, you have that in here somewhere. Yeah, it's right. Is it right here? Days after seeding. Yeah, required to reach 50. Oh, 50 and 90. So you have 50 here in 2000. Yeah, 90. And you can see, I don't know if you're comparing these horizontally or not, but you can just roughly see.
So the comparison, it's I believe it's written.
Here you go. Yeah.
From one column to another.
Yeah. So, I think the average is generally much slower than perennial ryegrass. They're going to know that, but the data support it. Oftentimes I get that question, well, is there any evidence? Because I'm big on show me the evidence. I know that's what you think, and I know that's what I think, but I might be wrong. And then here's the evidence if you ever wanted to know for sure. You want to talk to a homeowner. Hey, Mrs. and Mr. Homeowner, there's clear evidence that, perennial ryegrass is going to germinate and get to 50% in about 118 days. I mean, it's going to be fast. Whereas the other ones might take another month to get to that point, particularly Kentucky bluegrass. Yeah. That's pretty, I think I don't know the literature in germination and establishment with water, and I don't know that literature. I'm not a seed guy, but I would think that would be somewhat consistent in the literature. We see it a lot. So anyway.
Yes. Yeah. It's very consistent.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, it didn't really matter with perennial ryegrass. It was so fast, it didn't make any difference. Kentucky bluegrass, it required a little more time. Tall fescue required a little more time. And so was there a difference between, I know you mentioned it just briefly, but let's back up, talk about the details a little bit. Was there a difference in the amount of water required to germinate and get these tall fescues and Kentucky bluegrasses to the 50% and the 90%? Was there a difference there?
So if we look at those data, I have, the paper here in front of me. There's on table 5, and then table 6, it tells a little bit of a different story, but primarily table 5.
Okay.
There is a demonstration that the different frequency did not affect, which for us was also another surprise, because we expected at least a delay, or at least the 60% of ET with the every other day irrigation.
Yeah, here we go. Table 6. That's the frequency. Okay, table 6. Okay.
But table 6 was pulled for all the species and all the cultivar across. And as you can see, the difference only came in 2017. And part of the reason for that, I believe, is because of the different different rain event that happened between the 2012 years and the 2017 years.
Mm.
But ultimately, like they all resulted in a successful establishment.
Okay, so 2012, there was no influence whether you did it every day or every other day. It didn't make any difference, but all of them did it. But in 2017, all of them resulted in germination and growth to 50, 90%. But in 2017, they still all got to 50, 90%.
Yeah.
But which one did one of the two win the race, daily or the every other day? I mean, it looks like
so daily at 120% of VT won the race, which is the one with the letter C.
Okay.
But we're talking about a day difference or 2 days. I mean, of course, here we're talking about statistics and
So
it's statistically different, but like it's not meaningful, right?
So let me explain that to the audience though real quick, is that pragmatically there's no difference, but because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matteo, because your N was so massive, because you're pulling this across a lot of different cultivars, you were able to have the variation controlled to such a degree you were able to actually show statistically there's a difference. But no one's ever going to be able to see that in reality in this particular example. One day you're not going to see that, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure that I'm clear on that. If I'm correct, I'm sorry.
There were like 10 days of difference in reaching 50% of coverage.
Okay. Yeah, I see that right here.
That we try in this type of paper, we work with a statistician, and he did his work in measuring the area under the curve. In previous paper, I worked with the sigmoidal model, and you were doing like an interpolation of the data to reach that percentage of cover. So he believed that area under the curve was a better statistical method to determine the 50 and the 90% of coverage. But so there's like two way of well,
what was that? What were the two units on the area? Establishment time or establishment percentage? Okay. Time and percentage. Okay. Well, okay. Yeah. I'll buy that. I'll buy that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So what I highlighted in red, when I highlight something in red, I want to make sure that that I don't miss it. Yeah. And not that the other part's not important, but there's just a couple times when it's so useful. I think the average person would be amiss if we didn't mention it. And it says the focus of the study was to document the effects of irrigation amount and frequency on these grasses. In our study, we found that irrigating Kentucky bluegrass at levels below reference evapotranspiration replacement negatively affected emergence regardless of irrigation frequency. So once we're clear, Kentucky bluegrass, if we irrigated it below that, and we're talking about establishment, right? So
yeah.
And it didn't matter the irrigation frequency. There was a negative effect on seedling emergence on Kentucky bluegrass. So, there's a lot of people listening who do grow Kentucky bluegrass. I don't. I'm not a Kentucky bluegrass specialist. I know enough to know I don't have the energy, nor I don't want to put in the time to grow Kentucky bluegrass. So my tall fescue is perfectly fine. But for those people growing Kentucky bluegrass, if you're growing it in, it seems to me like you should be a little bit heavier with the water.
A little bit more cautious, right?
Yeah. A little bit heavier. Yeah. A little bit heavier with the water. If you're doing it below reference evapotranspiration, you might, it's going to eventually grow in. That's what your data showed. Eventually it's going to grow in, but you might be having to explain things to the homeowner or to the coach or to the members or whatever. Well, hold on. We've got another week or two before it gets there because whatever, maybe you're trying to conserve water, and that's fine. That's great. But if you're going to conserve water, what this means to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matteo, if you're going to conserve water, which we want people to do, that's going to come with a little bit of extra patience at the end because we need an extra week or two to get it to establish. Is that okay? Is that the way to say it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also wanted, to point out that this was a study in New Mexico, in southern New Mexico. So different environment.
Yeah, sure.
Affected by your precipitation. We didn't use any cover or any straw, which I know is a little bit more popular in the east to do that, especially with Kentucky bluegrass. Is probably some of the finest seeds that you'll have available in turfgrass. Like I was looking, I had like a handful of seeds that, and it's like, and you're telling me that I had to put this one on 25 square feet? How am I gonna get it down so precisely?
I got to show you the thing we rigged up before I left UK. I stole the idea from Dr. Mike Harrell, who runs the Southeast Turfgrass Research Center over here. And he had this, you've seen him before, though. He had these grid boxes or whatever. I'm like, shaker boxes and stuff. But what he did was he had this box, it was enclosed, and he had one of those cheap little fans. It's like a plastic propeller fan that you'd see like on the old school buses when you're driving to school, like in the 70s and 80s. He had a little fan, and at the top of this box, the box was completely enclosed, and there was a hole in the top of this box. And all you would do, that fan would run, and all you would do was take a little scoop with the amount of you needed, and then you would drop it in that hole, and that thing would spread it out. I'm like, that seems like that wouldn't work. But what happens is it throws it out so fast, it ricochets off all the walls inside, and it drops it down like just as smooth as you could. I mean, I was shocked. I'm like, that is the easiest thing I've ever seen. And so we built one at UK.
That is the first. We were using this shaker, so we would put the seed with a little bit of sand, either like one of those coffee shaker with some holes in it, and then we would just like shaking it. But
I'll have to send you some photos of that box we built. And we built one it was 2 by 2 meters, which is huge, 4 square meter box. And man, that thing was, that was the larger one, but it was all just like, this can't work. There's no way. And it was just, I couldn't believe it. And I'm convinced that it was just somehow ricocheting inside the box, and it would just randomly sit down. And when they germinated, I'm like, there's no way you could put that out there better if you put one seed by hand at a time. There's no way you could get it more uniform than that. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Nerding out on methodology.
It's all good.
So back to the paper. So that's what it was on Kentucky bluegrass. The conclusions are pretty straightforward. You have some really good straightforward sentences here, and what I can do, maybe I don't know if you can read it, or you have a copy of it there, don't you?
Yeah.
Do you want to read I like this second to last paragraph that I've highlighted here. Starts with in conclusion.
Which one? The successful establishment was achieved for all 3 species at both ET rates, 60 and 120%, by the end of the study period, which was the end of spring.
Mm-hmm.
Irrigation frequency had no effects on the establishment of cool season turfgrasses. And this one went a little bit against our expectations, where we felt that the irrigating every other day would have negatively impacted, especially with the 60%. And as I mentioned earlier, this study was sponsored by Barenbrook. So we had 5 treatments in study. That's why the 180% of ET, because we wanted to make sure that at least 4 of those were fully established. We were ready to lose one block replicated 4 times with the 60% of ET every other day, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then our recommendation will be to establish Kentucky bluegrass, and this is back to what you pointed out earlier, and tall fescue with 120% of ET. And perennial ryegrass, on the other hand, can be successfully established with ET rates as low as 60%.
Yeah. So for those people who are establishing perennial ryegrass, and I don't know if there's many people doing that in the spring now or not. Maybe that time might have, maybe depending on where you live, it might be going on right now as we speak. It's beginning of May now. It might be a little late. But if you do it in the fall, what it's saying is you don't have to put out much water at all. And they did it at 60%. That doesn't mean you have to do it at 60%. It might be some number lower than 60%. And if the ET is, what was it, an inch, 1.5 inches, whatever it was, a week, wherever you were, you're talking about a half an inch a week.
Yeah, table, the first table actually, which report the climatic condition from September to May, and it has the
here you go. ET right here. ET right here. Yeah. So September, October, January. So you're talking the month of January, millimeters now. Millimeters. That's 50 millimeters is 2 inches.
Yeah, unfortunately, agronomy journal require a scientific unit.
Hey, that's fine with me. That's fine with me. I don't, honestly, I don't want to have any. I don't want to create any enemies here. But the English units don't make any sense to me at all. I don't know where we come up with inches from. Someone explain it to me. I know. Majority of my audience is American and whatever. But I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. Just go with metric. But regardless, I do my best to convert them from SI units to English for my audience. But this is 2 inches. But that's per month. That's not a lot in January, and you can see, it changes throughout the year. But I guess the point is, it doesn't take a lot of water. You don't have to go out there and flood it. And that's what happens a lot of times, especially with homeowners. They'll turn on the irrigation, they'll go in and they'll watch the news or whatever. Meanwhile, it's 30 minutes later, they put out like 1.5 inches of water in one day. It's like, you don't need to do that. Just a tiny bit of water. And this is another example, with the exception of the Kentucky.
In fact, as when I was at UCR, there was Dr. Baird, and he was doing a study for Pythium control.
Okay.
And one way that he was trying to stimulate Pythium was by just running the irrigation constantly. So we put down some ryegrass seeds and turn on the irrigation every hour for like 10 minutes, just trying to get that thing so wet that it just creates those condition for pathogens to develop.
There's so many examples like that, Matteo, that we don't talk. We talk about what happens if you don't water, if you don't fertilize. I've shifted from that a little bit and start talking about what happens if you do fertilize with potassium. There's problems with applying potassium. A lot of people don't know that. There's problems with applying too much water. People don't necessarily think about that. In other words, I shouldn't say problems. There's risks involved with applying it just as much as there is with not applying it. In some cases, there's more risks, particularly with water. When you're applying too much, it's just my personal experience, which means nothing to the average person. But my personal experience is, whether it's ornamental plants that I'm growing or turfgrass that I'm growing, it's usually homeowners applying too much. They don't realize you can cause more harm than help when you apply too much water.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know. I hope that some of this information that you've published here, especially with perennial ryegrass, you don't need that much. But even with tall fescue, you're talking 120% ET. People go, well, what does that mean in inches? It's not a lot. Okay, it's nowhere near probably what people are applying now. I mean, if you actually run the ET numbers in your area, like Joe asked earlier, you find what the ET values are in your area, and you look at it. Okay, well, it's 1 inch every other week or whatever. Like, what? I mean, it's just like on a golf course, it's like one turn of the head or something. It's not much. On a home lawn, it's 5 or 10 minutes. It's not much. So,
and even if we are looking at the data on table 5, it clearly shows that even a 60% of ET, which is half of the 120. I mean, we reached establishment regardless,
Yeah, and I think that's another great point. I'm glad you brought me back to that, because if we want to become, I don't like this word, but more sustainable. I mean, I don't know what that means, so we're not real comfortable with that word. But if you want to be more sustainable, it's probably going to have to require a little bit of patience. It's not that you can't get to the finish line. It just means you're going to get to the finish line a little bit later, need another week or so. No big deal. You're still going to get there. The members are still going to be happy. The homeowners are still going to be happy, especially if you set the expectations. If you set the expectations and let them know from the beginning, we're going to do this because we're going to conserve a little bit of water. It's going to give me, but you're going to need to give me another week or two at the back end, and it's still going to be fine. It's the world's not going to come to an end is the point. I mean, it's turfgrass. It's hard to kill. I mean, it's going to grow. Just give it a little bit of food and a little bit of water. So I'm glad you said that, because yes, you have 120% on your report for tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. That's true, but it grew in fine at 60% ET as well. It just took a little longer. That's all. Okay, and we're talking. Here it is. I'll show you again. It's not 3 months. It's like a week.
Yeah, 10 days.
Yeah, in some cases it was pragmatically insignificant. I mean, it was 1 or 2 days. It's not a huge deal. And so I'd encourage my audience to actually go out, find what the ET is in your area, and then do 60% ET calculations and see how much that is. You'll be shocked at how little it is. It's not that much usually. And this was where was it in there? New Mexico? Or was this in California? New Mexico. It's not.
This was New Mexico, yeah.
New Mexico, and it's not that much. And that has, I don't know what the ET is and what the highest region is for ET, but it's got to be at the top in New Mexico and California.
It's one of them. Coachella Valley. It's in Las Vegas is among some of the highest in the entire country when it comes to like ET demand for the whole year.
Yeah, that sounds okay. That makes sense. Well, Matteo, I appreciate you coming on and going over this paper with me. It's these important papers that I'm fearful I'm going to mess up. So I want to make sure I don't do that. And so it comes from the authors themselves that I feel more comfortable. So,
well, thank you.
Do you have a minute or two to talk about some of the USGA initiatives? Just 1 or 2 about water conservation and what's going on there?
Absolutely.
Let me just brief the audience on my knowledge, which I don't know. Everything I'm saying could be completely wrong. The GCSA is aware and been doing surveys with water usage for a while. USGA has obviously been aware and doing a lot of sponsorship and work with water conservation and so forth. But I've heard this in the industry sort of, Twitter sphere sometimes about the USGA has an initiative to reduce water consumption or water use on golf courses. But I've heard this number thrown around, about 40% reduction. I have no idea if that's valid or true in any way. But can you kind of like correct me where I'm wrong or just validate what I've heard? Fill me in on what's going on.
So we have a statement out there, that said it's this program, then it's called 15, 30, 45, which is have a nice sound to it. And it stands for in the next 15 years, we want to invest $30 million to help golf courses reduce water by up to 45%.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
I know that from the GCSA and from other, association, we had a little bit of pushback on that because 45% seems a big number. And the investment, the $30 million is, because at the beginning when we made that announcement, we got golf courses they're starting to call and ask, how can we get those $30 million? I need to redo my irrigation system and I'm going to save 50% of water. It's like, well, we don't have a bank account with $30 million to give away.
That's what they heard. That's what they heard probably, right?
So I think, if we get there, it's more of like a bold statement because, there's something to say about like it's better to fall short of big expectation than overshoot like small expectations, right? So it's good to have a 45% as a big expectation goals. We know that in some parts of the countries, water conservation or the need for that, it's actually the opposite. The large majority of the golf courses, they are in climate where there is abundant precipitation, and like we talked earlier, greens constructions and everything and drainage is made to get rid of too much water. So we know that the challenge is not there, but the challenge, it's in the Southwest. It's in regions where more frequently it's getting into drought conditions. Just like today, Utah has announced 70 of their counties are under emergency status because of the drought conditions. Colorado and New Mexico are almost constantly in a drought. Of course, California, we got a little bit of luck with some rain, but and as golf course and turfgrass, it's always on the chopping block. It's easy to target turf as the crop that uses or wastes water. So That's why we gotta help golf courses to do a better job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I got at least two questions. One is, was there any discussion or conversation in the USGA about 45% reduction of what? Like total gallons used, water per acre used, water. I mean, what metric would they say, okay, if they hit this 45%, that would be a win? Because there's a lot of different ways to look at water usage on golf courses. I don't know if was there any conversation about that, or where?
I don't know if there was any conversation. I know that we were kind of basing that number of the GCA survey and some of the work that you and Brian Unruh have published. So
well,
hopefully, like we get some of the survey back, and especially like in like 5 or 10 years, and starting to show some reduction.
Yeah.
My guess would be total water use in terms of like acre feet of water.
Yeah, I think that's what the number that a lot of people go to. I mean, that's the big kahuna, if you want to call it that. Yeah. This is the total usage, total estimated usage, and this is what we want to see reduced. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Because, and I'll tell you why. We can reduce it 45% overnight. We just cut 45% of the golf courses, but no one wants to do that. I mean, we're not going to do that, right? So how do we continue to grow the game of golf and simultaneously reduce total water usage? I'm not sure what that means. I do agree with the argument that if we could reduce or increase the efficiency, so reduce the water use per acre or per facility or per, in other words, become more efficient with the water that we do use by some percentage. I'm all on board there, but I'm not sure what that means when it says like total water reduction, because I'm not sure. Is it attainable? That's the question. Is it attainable and still simultaneously grow the game of golf? Yeah. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
And so, here's my argument, because this is not the first time that it happened, but people get hung up a lot onto that 45% number. But I feel, with the playbook and with our strategies is just like you said, to become more efficient.
Yeah.
So we can eventually even like grow the game, but become more efficient. So, I don't know at which point we're going to get, but as you know, turfgrass reduction, it's a big strategy to reduce water use. You mentioned it. You cut the irrigated acre in half, and there you have your 45% of reduction. But
yep.
These might be suitable for some golf courses. It might be unachievable for others. So there are other solutions, turfgrass conversion, especially from cool season to warm season in environment that you can, obviously. It's produces a big savings. There's other strategies out there, like with precision irrigation, like you mentioned, we're not talking about the Steven Spielberg movie, but we're talking about evapotranspiration, and it's still widely unutilized.
I don't know why that is. I'm not sure. I think it's just, I can only speak for myself because I have irrigated ET and so forth. It's just the technology that I was using wasn't sensitive enough or precise enough to deliver the water that I was trying to apply. Now, I eventually adjusted it, and I was able to achieve that, but it took me manually doing it. And when I finally figured it out, I manually adjusted it literally every other day, or I literally turned it on and off in zones. And then I was like right on target, but to rely upon the system to do it itself, at least the system I was using wasn't quite good enough. I don't know. Maybe golf courses have that system and it's fine with them. Maybe the system is good with where they are. I don't know. But that leads me to my last question.
Yeah.
And I don't have the right answer. I don't know what the right answer is here. It's just more of an opinion than anything. Like if you were able to snap your finger and overnight change one or two things about golf with regards to water usage, what would be like the low-hanging fruit that you'd say, okay, these one or two management practices can really make an influence on more efficient usage of water or reduction in total water usage?
Well, we already touched it. It was one of the first things that we talked, and you mentioned how infrequent irrigation audit, and trying to quantify your precipitation rate and then use ET. So my top, the low hanging fruit would definitely be irrigation system use and maintenance. A lot of time, like you see, this state of the art $3-4 million irrigation system on a golf course that just goes neglected for 20-25 years. And so I believe there is a good level of savings or water conservation can be achieved just with that. And the other one is by implementing better technologies to irrigate, starting with ET. And you said it correctly, like it could take a little bit of playing, but also some of the work that came out from Minnesota or other work where it's hydrozoning or use soil moisture sensor to irrigate. I feel that when we do that, a good level of water savings is really achievable, and maintaining excellent playing conditions.
Yeah, I think you're there with the moisture sensor thing. We got to figure out some way to have that more, I don't know, more realized like this. I mean, I don't know if we have to go out and physically show them how to do it or show how simple it is or show whatever the case is. But
that's my job.
Oh, it is? Okay. Well, there you go. Hit on it. So I should call you.
Well, education and trying to, to communicate this or even doing demonstration. But, one of the things, and I'm sure the same, if you take a couple of good superintendents across the countries, and usually they're the spearhead of innovation. When they started to do something, when they started like clipping collections or data collection or that type, other, they started to talk with each other, and then eventually like the crowd will follow. So, with some of these projects, I'm trying to find those people that are willing to put these practices into test.
Yeah.
And then hopefully, like, the communication and the fire will spread among with like other people.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I often also wonder, like, because I don't know what the answer is to how can we really result in a measurable change, But you hit on it more than once in our conversation tonight when talking about converting from cool season to warm season. But even if they can't do that, adjusting within warm season varieties, like I don't want to bash any variety or cultivar, but there's clearly cultivars that are in, let's just say latitude 36, for example. It clearly, it rises to the top, or even some of the newer cultivars, you can call it Tiff Tough or what, I don't, there's a lot of different, the newer varieties, the genetics is where I'm going.
Yeah.
They seem to consistently, maybe not every time, but consistently rise to the top whenever they're in drought studies relative to older cultivars. So it seems like if a superintendent were inclined, they were doing a renovation or they're changing the turf or whatever, and the opportunity was there, that to select a drought tolerant cultivar does not necessarily mean an inferior turf quality or performing cultivar, because some of these perform extremely high levels and they're drought tolerant. So I don't know. I think that might be mine, but again, I don't know. I think not everybody's going to change their turf, so that's a very small percentage, so I don't know.
It's an expensive practice for sure.
Yeah. I just wish I knew, like, because I want to see the game grow, but we have such a large target on our back. I wish, like, what would be the one thing we could give to somebody? Say, this is one thing that there's a pretty good chance if you follow, you're going to see some reduction in water usage, and I'm just not sure what that is. I like your approach. I just again, I don't know. I don't know if my approach makes any sense. I don't know. I think that's part of what I'm supposed to do with some of this data, but I don't know how to do it.
We do. I don't have I don't have solid numbers yet, but I know that we have golf courses that has transitioned from an old Bermuda grass to a Tifta for Tahoma 31, which we know from research and published research, and it's using less water. Yet it seems like that when you're looking at their budget, um, there's not those savings. And I guess like it all goes back to who's managing it. Are they changing their irrigation practices, right?
Yeah, that's it. You hit it on the head, Matteo. Like it's not there's a human factor in there that we have to, as educators, have to get with them and let them know you have a new thoroughbred on the block. You can't treat it like the old horse. If you keep watering it and watering it and watering it, you're not going to realize the savings, or fertilizing or whatever the advantage of that particular cultivar is. You have to recognize you have a winning variety here, but you have to manage it appropriately to realize that. I couldn't have said it better. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the same thing with USJ spec greens. People overwater the greens. They're not using them based upon the physics and the way that they were managed properly. They overwater them. The way they're created was to hold the water up, and over applying the water just pushes all the nutrients down through it. So there's a lot of examples like that I think it's not their fault. I kind of blame it on me,
Yeah, and another good example is with the with the new cultivars, like new cultivars of bentgrass, that we know they're more tolerant to dollar spot or other diseases, and then we don't see a decrease in fungicide applications, and so
there you go. Exactly right.
That's
exactly
the question
right.
Is like, well, it's my safety blanket. Well, I don't want it to. I don't want to lose the turf that I just established.
Yeah. No. Yeah. You're right. There's a member asked a question, and then we'll shut it down. Last question I'll put on the screen. It says Joe Cal. Which one? I always forget who's where and which one of my members who's where. But he wants to know what your thoughts are on light and infrequent or deep and infrequent or light and frequent. I know the literature is going to tell me it kind of depends. But it's not always the same answer one way or the other. What are your thoughts on this?
My thought is you have to evaluate the climate that you are in, because like if you're in the desert, if you're in the Southwest with very sandy soil, it's impossible. It's very challenging to do a light and infrequent.
Okay.
The opposite is very usually they do light and frequent because the soil doesn't hold too much and you have high evaporation. So
okay.
You have to manage with that. In other climate, it's probably better, and it's always better to do heavy and infrequent irrigation. What we see, is this one definitely stimulates roots of the grass to go deeper.
Okay.
So that's
okay. That's your take. I appreciate it. I don't know the answer to it. Every time I read a paper, I'm like, it seems like one paper says this, one paper says that, and it kind of seems like it depends on, like you said, where you're at. Depends on what you're trying to achieve. But I don't know the literature that well to be able to answer that question. So I appreciate you answering. Matteo, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Hang on real tight. Don't hang up or anything. I'm going to come back to you, but I'm going to hang up on the show. I learned a lot. I always learn when I have guests on because they know things that I don't know. And this is one area that you really helped me out a lot.
I appreciate that's why I listen to your podcast, because I learn on nutrients and other aspects.
Well, it's like, for whatever reason you're interested in water and that's what you do for a living. It wouldn't be my choice, but your choice wouldn't be nutrients. Everybody's wired a little different. You're fascinated and interested in your area and your lane of turfgrass science, and that's what I do. So, but that's all I do. I don't do anything else, and I'm sure I don't know anything about weeds. I have people on speed dial for a reason. I'm like, well, I sent a photo of this. What disease is this? What do I do? I have no clue what this is. I'm like, well, how do you not know that? I'm like, I don't look up diseases. I don't know. So I don't look up water. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks to all my members. I appreciate all the subscribers, everybody here tonight. I will be back on Monday morning, and it'll probably be open to the public, I believe. I'll see what happens with the rest of the logistics behind the scenes here, but one way or the other, I'll be here on Monday morning. I really appreciate it. Matteo, I will hang tight. I'll come back to you in a minute. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye.